All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the Signal Hill campus of Memorial University. My name is Justin Brake. I'm editor-in-chief of The Independent, and tonight we are hosting the St. John's East 2025 federal election candidates debate. So thank you for coming, everyone who's here in the room, and to those watching online as well, welcome. I can see myself right now and there's sun in my eyes, and I'm not going to move because I haven't seen the sun very much lately. So I'm going to enjoy this and hopefully get a little bit of a tan. Anyways, for those watching online, some of you may have been on your way up here. Unfortunately, the city of St. John's is dealing with a water main break down at the bottom of Signal Hill. So there is no water to the building and to the rest of the neighborhood here, I think. So we have a fairly small, intimate audience here with us in person, and I can see that folks are watching at home. And of course, at the end of the event, we'll be sharing the debate. It'll be available immediately on our YouTube channel. We'll be sharing it online as well and getting it out through social media channels. I won't take up too much time, but I do want to say a couple of housekeeping matters. One is I'd like to thank the staff here at Memorial University because we didn't plan this debate or the one we had Monday night in Corner Brook very far in advance. And they helped us put this together and have put our minds at ease with the technology and everything. And so it's been a very easy, smooth process. So I'd like to thank the staff here. And also, I forgot to say this on Monday night, so I want to say it now and make it very clear that the reason why a small independent media outlet like us is able to do something like this is because the Public Policy Forum, the Rito Hall Foundation, and the Michener Awards Foundation very generously pooled together a bunch of money, and just a few weeks ago sent emails out to small and medium news outlets across the country saying they were going to give out funding to help everybody cover the federal election. So I immediately put in an application, and within a few days found out that now we actually have more resources to cover an election than we've ever had in our, almost 15-year history as a digital news outlet. So thank you to those organizations for helping us do this with the Covering Canada Election 2025 Fund. Just a few more things. I'll just explain sort of the format because debates can all be different. And until Monday, I was a debate virgin. I had never moderated a debate before, so I was really nervous and I was picking everyone's brains about how do I do this? What's the best format? What do I need to be aware of? So we decided on this format. By the way, Yumna Iftikhar, my colleague here, full-time reporter with The Independent, who's done an amazing job for us over the last year and a half, is going to be moderating the debate. So you won't hear too much from me after this. Yumna will take it in a few moments. What we're going to do for the format is the first round, we're just going to give the candidates an opportunity, and we'll introduce them as well in a moment, to say a few things about themselves and sort of what they're hearing on the campaign trail and so forth. And then the next 6 rounds after that, we have picked 6 topics which we gave to the candidates in advance, but we didn't give them the questions we're going to ask. And so we are going to, the order they don't know either. So we're going to go just in order. Whoever goes first in the first round, in the second round, the next person will go first. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to the question. So they all get 2 minutes, and then the candidate who went first will get 1 minute at the end to respond to anything that the other 2 said and to share any final thoughts on the matter. And so we're going to do 6 rounds like that. And then at the end, if all goes well, as it did in Corner Brook, we'll have time for audience questions. And since there will likely be way more people tuning in online, we'll take some questions here in person first. But I'm also going to keep an eye out online on the YouTube chat. And so anybody who's watching online, maybe don't send your questions just quite yet because they might get buried. So when we get to the audience questions, you can start sharing your questions if you like, and I'll try to get as many of them in. So that's how that's going to go. And we'll do the audience questions at the end, and I think we're also going to give the candidates just a moment or two to kind of clue up and say any final thoughts as well. So I will now, without further ado, also one more thing. I'm going to be timing everything on my cell phone. I really wanted to have like a cowbell or something, like something more fun to hit, but the cell phone is going to have to do it for tonight. We just ask that the candidates don't go over their time, just so we can keep everything on track. And the only other thing I'll say is, and I don't think it doesn't look like we have too rowdy of a crowd here tonight, but please save any comments or questions you have for the end, and try not to interrupt the candidates as they're giving their responses. All right, that's it for me. Over to my wonderful colleague, Yumna.
Hi guys, I'm Yumna, and before we start off, just one quick thing. I'm visually impaired, so if you see me like really looking into my iPad, just ignore it. So we're here with 3 of the 5 candidates running for the St. John's East riding, and we invited all 5 candidates, but Conservative candidate David Brazil and Liberal incumbent Joanne Thompson declined the invitation. So we do have here Sam Craig from the Communist Party, Mary Shortall from NDP, and Otis Crandall from Green Party. So for round 1, you all have 3 minutes, and we're going to start off with Sam. Just introduce yourself, tell us what you've been hearing at the doors, and what are you going to do if elected?
Yes. So yeah, I'm a communist, a part of the Communist Party. We are the 2nd oldest political party in Canada. We started in 1921. So this is our 104th year of being active. We haven't been as active in this province. At one point, communists were turned away from the docks from getting into here. Like, we simply weren't allowed into this province for a long time. That was a more heightened era, of course. But we're just trying to bring that message that's been in this country for a long time, bringing it to this place. Of course, a lot of locals have been very receptive to a lot of our ideas. People are when we're going to door to door, people are very concerned about things like grocery prices. People are afraid of, job insecurity. There's a lot of worry out there at this moment. We are very much in an age of falling expectations, and that is very much true here in Newfoundland. People are also afraid of things like climate change. People are very much afraid of fascistic threats coming from our southern border. And we're worried about our economic downfall that is seemingly on the horizon as well. And really, as a Communist Party, what we see that all of these crises, right, all of these problems that people are really worried about, they are facilitated by or related to a capitalist economy. It is a capitalist economy that makes these things sort of happen. And until we change fundamentally and radically how our economy operates, we aren't able to actually address these crises as we need to, right? For example, for the climate change, right, it's there's things that we can do. We can increase taxation. There can be, different sorts of carbon taxes if that's what works. But fundamentally, it's about funding allocation, right? And it is not profitable necessarily to be investing in green energy, for example, as it is in other more fossil fuel related industries, right? So that profit motive gets in the way of us addressing what we need to be addressing. And that's sort of the basics of our party. We want to change our capitalist economy into a socialist economy to actively deal with all of these crises that we are facing. So yeah, that's sort of my opening, I think.
Time's up.
Perfect.
Hi everyone, I'm really happy to be here this evening, and I thank the organizers because this is a really important exchange that we need to be having throughout the election campaign. I'm Mary Shortall. I was born and raised, educated, worked, and currently live in St. John's East. I've been an activist all of my life in my community, in the feminist movement, in the union movement, in the social justice movement, and in the NDP. My entire adult life has been about one thing, and that's fighting for people. I've dedicated myself to making our communities and our province a fairer, more just place to live, to work, to raise a family, and to retire with dignity. I know what it's like to work hard and still lie awake at night wondering how the bills got paid. I know how crucial strong public services are because everyone deserves a fighting chance. For the past 4 years, I've knocked on countless doors, stood at demonstrations, rallies, picket lines, attended a wide range of events, volunteered in my community, and listened at countless kitchen tables and many other spaces because I care deeply about this riding and the people who call it home. But more than speaking, I've listened to the students struggling with debt, to the parents scrambling to find childcare and a family doctor, to working parents feeling like they failed because they have to go to a food bank to feed their children, to the senior forced to choose between heat, food, and life-saving medication. Their stories are why I'm running, to be their voice, to take on the greedy corporations and a system that's rigged for the wealthy few, to fight for pharmacare, healthcare, dental care, childcare, strong public services, because those aren't luxuries, they're the foundation of a just society. And it's really too bad that not all my running mates are here tonight. Hearing from folks during a campaign is the most important part of this job.
Sorry, time's up, Mary.
Okay.
Well, my name is Otis, and I'm grateful to be here. It's really nice to get invited by the media. Sometimes I have to invite myself to these things. It's really nice that you guys actually contacted me and said, hey, come on out to this thing. So up until very recently, I had no ambition about becoming a politician. I don't think of myself as a politician. I think of myself as, I'm a Canadian, but, I'm getting on the years, and, over time I've started to say, like, I don't think that the system serves us. Politics, I'm not really, I'm not really pleased with the way politics, sounds like it's going to stick on me there. Okay, I'll just hold still, really still there. Yeah, so I'm running because I think we need to do politics different. I think we have to get away from party politics and look at people politics, where I think that you should be voting for a person, not a party. You should be voting for someone that's going to represent you and that's going to represent the people in this community. And that's why I'm running with the Green Party. I'm not a representative of the party because the party has policies, and I agree with most of them. I think almost all of them, the ones I'm familiar with. But I'm at liberty to disagree with them. The Green Party does not hold me. If I am elected, I'm not held to go by their policies. And other Green MPs in the past have disagreed with the party leader and the party if it benefited their riding. And so I want to do politics a different way, to say, what do the people in the riding want? I've been going door to door. I hear the same thing over and over again. It's housing, it's cost of living, food particularly, transportation. Is that my time?
I was going to give you 5 extra seconds for the
Okay.
wardrobe malfunction
So-
there.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm the first one in my family to even go to university. We don't think of myself as, destined to be a politician. But I'm here because I'm Canadian, and I want to do things differently. I want a grassroots campaign, looking at the people in this riding first and foremost.
Okay, that's good. Thank you very much. That's it for the first
Yeah.
round.
We're at the second round, and our first topic is the economy. The recent provincial budget projects a decline in household income and employment until 2028. US tariffs are already having an impact, and things are likely to get worse. That's going to impact people who are already struggling to make ends meet. If elected, how will you help workers and others, particularly through taxation and social support? And we'll start with Mary. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. That's a really good question, because we can and we should build a more resilient economy that puts people first, people before profits and people before corporations, not just because of Trump, but despite him. This is something that we should have been working on for the long term for a long time. People are falling through the cracks, and all those issues that have been mentioned around affordability and joblessness and everything else have already been issues identified even before all this happened. And the threat of tariffs and what's happening south of the border is only making it worse. but it didn't cause the problems that we already seen. One thing we cannot do is to cut government spending. And both the Liberals and the Conservatives have said their first order of business, their words, not mine, is to cut operational costs, cut public spending, reduce public sector jobs. And that's not going to address those issues that are keeping parents awake at night. What we need is investments in those public sector jobs, especially now, especially on the federal level, to make sure we have a strong social safety net for people who may need it before too long. Because you can't talk about the economy without talking about the social services and the programs and the social safety net that people are entitled to and they actually pay for. We also need a fair taxation program. We don't need to cut taxes for the very, very rich or even for any of us except the very poor at this point, because we need those taxes to pay for the services that people need, and we need the people who are very rich to be able to pay their fair share. So a revision of a tax system is what's needed, not just tax cuts all the way around. We also need to work on those things that put a little bit of money in people's pockets.
Sorry, Mary, that's your time.
Okay, which we'll talk about some other time, I'm sure.
Otis.
I'm just watching the time. Yeah, I would agree also that we need to emphasize the social benefits that we can get. In terms, and people always ask, so, well, where are you going to get the money from? And one of the things is you do need to tax people proportionately. I mean, there's a lot of large companies that don't get taxed. You know, they get subsidized even. You know, that's not like, some of them are ones that you could really benefit local. Like some of them do provide jobs, but we need to tax large corporations. We also need to look at some people that are making large amounts of money and tax them proportionately, not tax everyone the same, including the poor guy who gets taxed the same as someone else who can get tax write-offs and stuff like that. But yeah, I think that if we emphasize on the social benefits that you get, such as health care, affordable housing, then we can attract people into regions. We can get industry working in those regions. You know, for example, here, and that is a big thing here, that we need to attract more people into the province, people with skilled, or retain the people that are here that have skills. You know, in order to do that, we need social services here, and we need an infrastructure that people will say, I like to live there. I'm going to stick around here instead of moving to another province or abroad. So I think that would be. Yeah,
That's on time?
Yeah.
Sam.
Yeah. So the Communist Party of Canada has been advocating for Canadian economic sovereignty and independence from the U.S. economy for a very long time. Only recently have people on the Conservatives, even wildly enough, have been starting to suggest the same thing. It seems like now though the other parties are starting to catch up with us. So what we need to be doing is we need to be Trump-proofing our economy. So how do we do this? One of the ways that we can do this is by having an enormous social housing project to make 2 million social housing units. What this does is this increase domestic demand in sectors affected by tariffs. So you have steel, you have lumber. Now immediately demand has skyrocketed to make all of these homes that people need. This is a very feeding many birds with one stone, if you will, right? You can create housing. We solve the housing crisis. We lower the prices of housing. We also save these very much affected industries, right? This is something that we can do if we decide to. Secondarily, in terms of ensuring our economy stays stable, we can actually be nationalizing key sectors of our economy. We can be placing them under public ownership. This provides good jobs to people and ensures profits are reinvested into public needs, right? We can nationalize these industries, particularly energy would be very good, right? This should be under democratic control. Many of these big like energy sectors, social spend, all these things affect the public drastically. And so we should have a say over how they operate. And then we should also be redistributing those profits to everybody instead of just being in private hands. So yeah, we want public ownership of things like the banks energy and natural resources, telecommunications and internet service. This is a great way to halt the privatization that's creeping in on our public infrastructure as well. So through these methods, we can actually deal with the problems that our economy faces. We don't want to be fragile. We need to be self-reliant. We need to have our own economic sovereignty. There are ways to do that, and that's how we suggest it.
That's on time.
I don't know if that was intentional, but good timing.
Mary,
Teacher skills.
you have a minute if you'd like to add anything.
I just want to add, just for that minute, that it is important that we invest in a kind of worker-first economy, and those are choices that can be made, listing all the things that we've been talking about, but like investment in decent, fair work, safe work, investment in quality public services, investment in local communities, small businesses, all those things that make us thrive as an economy. But if we want people to come here and live here and work here, which we do, then we need to make sure we have the supports in place for them to do that as well. It's one thing to say, let's just do it, but they need good infrastructure, good roads, good schools, good health care, access to health care. That includes pharmacare and dental care and all those things that help create a strong economy and to make this particular province thrive. There's lots of ways to do that. We just need the political will to do it.
Perfect. So we are at our third round, and our next topic is natural resources and climate change. The climate consensus is clear. Fossil fuel extractions must end soon. The International Panel on Climate Change and the International Energy Agency have both said no more fossil fuel projects if we hope to achieve net zero by 2050. Yet we hear this province and others saying we need to ramp up oil production as part of green transition. And there are a lot of people in the city employed in the oil and gas industry. How will you, as MP, facilitate a swifter transition to clean renewable energy while ensuring that thousands of oil and gas workers can continue supporting their families now and into the future? And Otis, you're up first.
Okay. Well, it's a good question to ask someone from the Green Party, I suppose. That's something that we actually talk about quite a bit. Right here in St. John's East, I think it's actually a really great area to talk about that because we have 2 post-secondary institutions here in town. I believe there are at least 15,000 students at Memorial alone. And I would be extremely surprised if some of them don't have ideas on how to do energy better. We do need to transition, so I don't say like just stop and do nothing. We have to train people and prepare them for jobs so that when we stop producing or stop harvesting oil, stop collecting oil, gas, that there is something else for them to transition into. So I would say education is the big one. And we need to develop what are other profitable forms of getting energy. And that's, I think, where the university comes in, where we have all these bright young minds. And they're the ones that are going to inherit this problem, long after I'm gone. They're the ones that are going to have to deal with it. So I would say give them a chance. We need to fund these programs at the university, offer scholarships or funding for research or for students that going into these fields, because they're the ones that are going to come up with these solutions of how to do energy better. And we have we just down the road, here in this building, this is part of the campus. There are people here that can come up with that. So I would say keeping the way to keep the jobs is to make sure that we're putting education. There are opportunities for people working in the field now to transition so that they're not out of job. And we need to look at better forms, look at innovation. I talked to a group recently, not too far from here. There's another riding. Okay. Thanks.
Sam, your turn.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is there are many Newfoundlanders that work in the oil and gas industry. And, as a communist, we are a pro-worker party, and we've been a pro-worker party for 104 years. That is always a priority of ours. We can't have a repeat of our fish moratorium situation. We can't just put all these oil and gas workers suddenly out of work simply because we need to be transitioning to green energy. Those people deserve better, and they need to be guaranteed jobs within that green energy. That needs to be replaced. So if we allocate our public spending drastically into green energy, right, then we can create the jobs necessary to replace those ones that have been lost through oil and gas. And in the interim, maybe that would be quite the transition, of course. But we need to make sure that those people are not just left jobless. That can never really happen again. I think that was a great mistake with the fish moratorium. It would be another one to do something similar with transition from fossil fuels to green energy. So yeah, I think that's sort of. I guess that's all I can say about it. We need to be really taking this seriously. And I guess the last thing I'll say is, if I have a second, is we can't talk about transitioning to green energy and sustainability. That can't really happen unless we are consulting the indigenous populations of this island. Right? That is really important part of this transition into green energy is how do we do this in a way that is actually sustainable? How do we actually live in this environment that can only really be understood through acknowledging indigenous sovereignty? They need to be very key players at this table in this talk towards a greener energy infrastructure. So I guess that's all I would say on that topic.
I would say that it's still unbelievable that in this day and age, with major economies investing in renewables and clean tech and wind and solar energy and all that, this provincial government and our federal governments are talking about investing still in oil and gas, because it's a recipe for falling behind. If we don't adapt, jobs and investments will go and other people will take the lead and we'll be left behind like we often are once again. The NDP has been very clear about no more subsidies for profitable oil and gas companies, and it's very important to shift into cleaner energy. They believe in the east-west grid for electricity, and they have all kinds of plans about that. But I've been representing workers my whole life, and not only workers in the oil and gas industry, but workers who have benefited from the spin-off jobs from that. And if we don't do something, if we don't bring workers to the table, we bring industry to the table and governments to the table, Indigenous communities to the table, and the communities where these projects are impacting the way of life to a table, and talk about just not just how we transition into greener jobs and better jobs, but how we do it in a just and equitable way. Because, and I did say it at the Energy NL debate when I was there the other day, most of the people in that room who have adult children working in the oil and gas industry and the spin-off jobs don't want to be knocking on their parents' door saying, Mom, Dad, we got to come live with you because we just lost our jobs. And by the way, we're taking our children with us. We don't want to leave Newfoundland, Labrador, and we can't make a decent living now because nobody had a plan. And we shouldn't even be in that position. There's been lots of research. There's been lots of commitments by governments, but there's been no real actions. The reports have been done. We know what we need to do. And it's not just about retraining. It's about a whole lot of other things as well.
And Otis, if you want to finish your thought or add more.
Yeah, I'm not sure that, I'm not sure if there's really much to add to it, but yeah, I do like one thing you said, about consulting people. And yeah, in any type of big project, there is a lot of stakeholders. And I think the main stakeholders at the moment is like people in the city here who may have jobs other places in the province or the country. So yeah, I think any big project, and transitioning from fossil fuels to clean energy, that is a big transition. And any type of initiative like that, there would have to be a lot of people at the table, to find out, like, whether from social point of view, technological point of view, that is a big initiative. But I do think that it's not, the big issue is not transitioning, it's the details of it where we need to bring in people for that. To make sure that these people aren't unemployed afterwards. Yeah.
And we heard you guys talk about retention, so we're going to move on to immigration and population growth. Several industries and sectors are having trouble recruiting workers or keeping workers. And our population is aging more so than other provinces. While some labor-related issues could be addressed with a higher minimum wage, the province is abundantly clear that it needs to continue welcoming immigrants and newcomers to help fill worker gaps. Newfoundland and Labrador recently had to negotiate higher immigration rates after the Liberals slashed immigration numbers. If elected, what will you do to support the province's need for more immigrants? And I think we're back to Sam.
Yeah, so the Communist Party is pretty clear on this stuff. We need to have a more democratic immigration policy. We need to ensure that there's never any deportations. And we need to ensure that the way that immigrants are treated here is so, often they become scapegoats for the capitalist economic crises that are happening. Things like housing are often blamed on immigrants. This should be considered hate speech, which is exactly what it is. So we, of course, want to be expanding and increasing funding for refugee housing to ensure safe, adequate, dignified accommodations for all newcomers. They are entitled to that. That's how we keep them here, right? And then we have, our population problems are resolved, our labor problems are resolved, right? We need to be welcoming immigrants into this place with open arms because it's what we need. We need to be scrapping temporary foreign worker programs, and we need to be providing clear and accessible paths to permanent residency and citizenship for all migrant workers. A lot of the coworkers that I work with are migrants, and it's just so wild to me that you have to be working full-time hours. You need to be classified as a full-time worker in order to get residency, even if you have a couple of different jobs. Even if you're working 70 plus hours a week at 3 different jobs, you're not considered full-time, so you don't get permanent residency. So that's a problem. We need to really be welcoming these people in, and I think that the policy is not so welcoming. Yeah.
Perfect timing, Mary.
I believe this is a province where we definitely need to have a clear vision for workers coming in and studying here at reasonable tuition rates. I mean, towards always a system of free education, post-secondary education. But we definitely need, as I said in an earlier question, to have the supports in place so that when people come to live in this province, they're supported. They're supported through settlement programs, but also through good educational, good investments in our educational system, in our healthcare system, in our roads and infrastructure. So they need to be supported. You just can't say we're going to bring in so many people and then just leave them here and to find their own way. We need to fix the immigration backlog, which exists federally. We need to improve the foreign credential recognition so that when people come here and they're trained in a lot of the areas that we need, that they actually have a path to recognize their credentials faster and to work in key areas like healthcare and other areas as well. And we do need to end Canada's reliance on temporary foreign workers. These workers are exploited terribly. And if workers come in to fill jobs, even in a temporary way, they should be treated like every single other worker. They should have all the rights that every other worker has. They should be subject to workers' compensation legislation, which they still aren't, not tied to an employer, and they should be given the supports they need. That is a horrible exploitation of workers, and employers shouldn't be getting subsidies to do that. They should be paying them just like every other worker. We also need to implement a broad and inclusive program that gives people without status a clear pathway to permanent residency, and it shouldn't have to wait forever before they get that residency. There's so many things we can do.
And Otis.
Yeah, actually, this is one that I was talking about with colleagues recently. So yeah, there's quite a few ideas on this, and this is something I've actually talked with people around town with. Like a lot of people here, we need medical professionals in this province. And the crazy thing is that Canada is receiving a lot of foreign medical professionals, but they're not able to work in their field because of its bureaucracy. So we need these people. We have these people, but we're not putting them, to the use, putting the occupations that they came here as. So we do need to make it easier first of all, for people to get PR, get permanent residency for high demand occupations and high demand research fields. We do need to speed up accreditation for high demand jobs so that we can get people here doing jobs that we need people doing and that they came here to do. We do need to scrap the foreign worker, the temporary foreign worker permit, because if people are good enough to work here, they should be good enough to live here, which then means they can bring over their families as well. So it's not like they're isolated like that. As far as the growth, so this is something that we see here in St. John's. You know, we've had a lot of international students come, and that is great for Canada. It builds our ties. It makes Canadian standards the international standard, and it brings bright young minds in. But we're not preparing towns to receive these growth in population. We need to, on a federal level, put programs in where we can invest. Say, if this place is receiving a lot more people, whether they're students or new immigrants, that we have the infrastructure for them. You know, we have housing for them. This is something you see around the university, lack of housing, you know. So yeah, we need to have better infrastructure for the newcomers.
And 1 minute for you, Sam.
Yeah, and I just want to echo some of the things that have been said about, you know, credentials. You know, I've been working with people in the nonprofit sort of sector, and they're like, they have PhDs in like biomechanics. You know, working in a social, I'm happy that they're my coworkers, like it's really awesome, but they're just so trained in other places, and it is such a shame that all of those skills are not being allocated and used in the ways that they need to be used. So I definitely agree with getting those foreign credentials need to be validated. I also think the last part of this as well is, you know, if you're living here, you know, for a long period of time and planning on staying here, or even if you're just here for a few months before moving to some other place, I think that they, you know, immigrants should have they're affected by the policies that our government makes, right? Like, I don't understand why I'm talking to a lot of immigrants when I was going around trying to get signatures, right? A lot of people are like, I would love to sign on and help you out with this, but I can't vote. So I would just like have increased voting rights for immigrants. I think that would be important.
We're at our 6th round, and we're looking at fisheries. So for this question, we asked other authors from the Independence Seasplainer series, Jen Thornhill Burma and Leela Bodwin. And their question was, while fisheries are worth more today than before the 1992 cod moratorium, they prop up hundreds of communities in the province. And yet, year after year, fishers and plant workers are asking for fairer wages. Now we have the uncertainty of the US tariffs and trade war. How will you reprioritize the fisheries to ensure their longevity? And Mary, we'll start off with you.
Okay, so the fisheries is a really important piece of our economy. It's still $1 billion industry, and decisions are being made by DFO and by governments that have harmed fishers in this province and fish plant workers in this province many, many times. So the first thing, yes, they may be unionized, but the decisions that are made by government is taking away their hours, taking away their ability to catch the amount of fish they need to catch in order to make sustainable wages sometimes. The fact that there's international, multinational trawlers fishing on the offshore, part of an allowable catch that should belong to inshore and Indigenous fish harvesters in here. That's been made as a political decision supported by the Minister of the Days, is something that says to me that what we need to be doing when there's decisions around the fishery is talking to the experts, the real experts in the fishery, and that's the people who harvest the fish and process the fish. There are lots of things that can be done. The fish harvesters themselves have sacrificed a lot since the moratorium in order to conserve the stock that they have, and to have the quota now be given to a commercial fishery and to an offshore fishery is absolutely unacceptable. And every single one of the Liberal ministers in this province supported the fisheries minister decision on that. But the other issues that are really important to fish harvesters is the adjacency principle. So the fish that is caught closest to the communities need to benefit from that, so that it's not shipped otherwise, right? So there's lots of different things that they can be doing to that. The small inshore fish harvester fleet. Oh, okay. Can't go on anymore. Sorry.
Otis.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things is interprovincial trade and some of the barriers to it. You know, particularly the fact that here we're on an island, and Labrador is on the mainland as well, but they do a lot of like stuff by boat. So I think we need to look at like cutting back on some of the fees that people are paying and the monopoly that some of the ferries have on transporting stuff. So so that we're not losing money. Oops, sorry, we're not losing money in that way. But I do also think that we should set up committees where they're partially, like, again, it comes back to who are the stakeholders. And one of them may be government, one of them may be different industries, but one of them is the fishermen themselves, people that are working directly in the industry, and to find out, okay, what do you see as the main problem? What do you see as the cause? And what would you like to see as the solution? And from there find solutions. I mean, I'm not a fisherman. I've worked in agriculture, but not in fisheries. So for me to come up with a solution would be a bit disingenuous. I think that we need to get committees with people that are in the industry themselves, not just politicians and lawmakers. Okay, I think that was the most thing.
Okay.
I don't know how much time I had there. I wasn't
You
watching.
have 30 seconds left.
Okay. I would also say like we need to strengthen trade unions and the power that they have. In some industries, trade unions do have a lot of power. Others, like you said, they are constrained by government decisions. But I would like to see a little bit more power given to the trade unions. Okay, I think that's good.
Right, and Sam?
Yeah, I feel like I don't have much to say. I like both your answers so much. I think you both really understand this. Like, that's like exactly what I would be wanting to say. I like where you are placing the value. Who has the power of this decision making, right? You've identified exactly who it is, and it should be the fishermen, right? What more needs to be said about it? I'm happy to see that we're all in agreement about how we should be operating this. They are the experts. They know what they are doing. That's the other thing. Of course, a part of this conversation has to be about sustainability as well, right? Sustainability of the cod population, right? Earlier Mary mentioned the international trawlers that are going around our shores. Is this actually sustainable? Can our stocks actually last with this amount of fishing, right? So we need to be doing what we can to ensure that these can continue to be sustainably resourced for a long time. The only reason that settlers are in this space to begin with is because people could fish the cod and then they could survive. There isn't enough farmlands around to actually have the nutrition necessary to live here. So the ancestry of this place, and of course indigenous populations as well, it's because of those fish, right? And so that needs to stay true. We need to, our relationship to this animal is very, it's very important. And we need to maintain that relationship through ensuring sustainability in a way that works for the workers who are out there, getting this stuff and practicing what Newfoundlanders do, right? That's all I would say on the topic of the fisheries.
And Mary, you have the last minute.
Yeah, I would just like to add a few things in the minute that I have. One around sustainability. Fish harvesters, and I've worked around the fish harvesters and plant workers who've been unionized for a while, and they are real stewards of their own product. They understand what it takes. During the moratorium in 1992 to this day, there has been a stewardship program, and it was the fish harvesters who asked not to move the fish into a commercial zone right now, to keep it in the cautious zone. So they are good stewards of the sea. The other things I think that would help support, because tariff threats will really impact the fishing industry. And I think one of the things we need to do is make sure we have the systems in place to support those harvesters through that time. The EI system does not serve fish harvesters and seasonal workers very well right now, and we've been asking for reform in that for a long, long time. They need that reform. They also need measures that protect the families and the communities, and value added for the fish processors. So, like we can export value added things as well. Sorry.
And Otis, you get the last question before we move on to the audience. So the topic is seniors. How will you better support seniors if elected?
Well, as someone sort of kind of guess getting close to that age myself, I do have to sort of think about, that may be a bit of a self-serving sort of answer there. I think that we do, our population is aging, not just that individuals are, but the average age is also going up. And we do need to actually be prepared for that. I think a lot of it will come into healthcare and what types of healthcare we can actually provide, including home care. That needs to be something that's actually part of universal healthcare, a home care component of it. I think we do also have to advocate for more programs for seniors, not necessarily seniors facilities, but something, we have a lot of daycare. We take care of our children, but we don't have the same sort of infrastructure for elderly, where we have people that can come in and help you. So if you want to take care of your parent, you don't want to put them into a home, you want to take care of them, that's a lot of work. We need to be able to train people to say, okay, you want to take care of your mother or your father when they get older, here's training that you can do that. And then here's infrastructure so that you get the access to the medical facilities or medical personnel when needed, so that they can actually remain in their home with family as they age. I think we also need to really look at how pensions are, because nowadays I can't really think of, look forward to having to live off of a Canadian pension, if I don't have money put away, or if I've worked at a really good job where the company is going to give me a pension. I don't know whether that's going to help the current seniors, but the population is aging, and we really do need to look at how pensions are going to be in the future.
And Sam.
Yeah, so we of course support increasing full pensions. We need to be not only increasing pensions and using that social spending, we need to be protecting pensions as well. We need to be strengthening bankruptcy laws, right? We need to be prioritizing workers' wages and pensions above other creditors. So like if a place, if a business goes bankrupt, it's not, pensioners that are at a disadvantage with this sort of thing. It should always be the pensioners and the workers who are getting out of that unscathed rather than very rich creditors. We also want to substantially increase the Canada Pension Plan and our old age security benefits. We also want to reduce our pension age to 60. That would be really nice. We'd also like to maintain the full pension benefits, even with a reduced pension age. We also want to double the Canada Disability Benefit, ensure provincial disability pensions. This is also an aspect of how we want to be helping our seniors. And really, I just want to say that with a lot of these things, this goes along with how do we take care of seniors? We also need to be taking care of our health care. We need to be increasing our public spending. That is a net positive. And when you have an economy that is designed to accommodate for social needs, when you have a socialist economy, all of these things become a lot easier to action, right? When we appropriate all of the profits that come from our privatized industry and they are just immediately reallocated into public spending, then it is very easy to fund all of these things on a broad scale, right? It always comes down to how do we pay for this, right? If we are taxing the right people and we are putting profits into the collective hands of workers instead of the capitalist class, then we can do all these things really easy. It's very easy to take care of seniors if we have the money and the political will to do so, right? That's sort of how I see it, right? It's I can say I'll advocate for pensioners, of course I will, but it's so much easier to do that with a socialist economy. And that's what we stand for in the Communist Party. So that'd be my time.
We haven't treated the folks that raised us and whose sweat and toil built our economy very well. And I'm one of them, a senior as well. And I have a whole list of things that I think the federal government should do. The first thing they should do is return the Minister of Seniors, that ministry which they did not replace when Mark Carney appointed a new cabinet. There's no Minister of Seniors, and that's just not okay at all. When we're talking about seniors issues, the issues of affordability should be on top of mind because there are policies specifically needed for seniors. Even in the general issues of affordability like housing, healthcare, cost of living, cost of housing, seniors are sometimes in a different category altogether with those costs. Pensions and GIS and all those things are also very important. The GIS especially should be indexed to inflation, and it should keep up with the cost so at least seniors can pay for their basic needs. Long-term care needs to be a public service. We need to take the profit out of long-term care. I've been talking to seniors for a long time now on this journey, and there are seniors who live in great comfort, whose families are paying an awful lot of money to have them in there, and there's seniors who are living in deplorable and terrible living conditions. But everyone should be able to live in a nice senior's home and treat it with some dignity, because you don't earn dignity. You should already have dignity, and we need to make sure we do that. The pharmacare program should be made universal so that all medications are paid for, and we should make sure that we also look at a strategy for seniors so that a senior's lens can be put on all those things that policies and legislation that happen. And we have to pay particular attention, I think, especially in this province, to seniors who live in rural and remote communities because they're disproportionately impacted.
And you have a minute.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot to add to it. I do think it is important what you mentioned about rural areas, because although right now we're in St. John's, and the riding is called St. John's East, but it's a little bit more than just St. John's. We do have rural parts just a couple, within an hour's drive from here. And I think that one of the things that we focus on, and like I said, we have to look at what's the issue in this riding. Okay, and then one of the things in this riding, which may be different if you're in Toronto or Montreal, is that we do have a lot of smaller communities which have a very high elderly population. And so we have to go and see what are the specific issues in those areas where you have small communities which are even more aged than you may have in St. John's, and particularly that you would have in big cities like Toronto or Montreal, where a lot of policies get made. Yeah, local.
And we can move on to the audience round. Audience will have, we'll have questions both offline and online. And audience will have 30 seconds to ask the questions, and then each candidate gets a minute to reply.
Okay, I'm just going to interrupt for 1 second. If anybody who is having a drink, there's about a little over half an hour left. Anybody who wants a drink, a free one on The Independent, you can go and get it now. Before it shuts down. Between now and 9 o'clock, if you want to grab a drink, it's on us.
Oh. Hurry up, guys.
And it is a Wednesday night, so keep that in mind. We're not going to get too crazy here.
Could we move the discussion over there?
That goes for the candidates if somebody wants to deliver you a drink.
Who's your most loyal supporter, guys? Now is the time.
Our answers are much better after this.
Yeah. That's all. That's it for this public service announcement. So, go ahead. Do you want to go ahead? So does anybody have any questions in the audience here?
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I got a microphone so that people watching online can hear. There you go.
Was wondering about that for accessibility. Thank you. Gwe hi, Deluisi Birdie, Deluisi Nalmazdagwek. My name is Birdie Lehman, pronouns she, they, he. I'm a two-spirit Mi'kmaq land protector of the Hullaboo First Nation. I'm stating that just to like center indigeneity because I think it's important to do that in these conversations. I also serve as the co-chair for the National 2SLGBTQIA+ National Council of the Assembly of First Nations. So that's context for the question being that Two-Spirit and trans people are very much a hot button issue right now in terms of the politics and in terms of the way that we're seeing attacks in terms of the rhetoric of the United States. But we're also seeing that hateful rhetoric spill over into Canada. And we're now seeing a time when even federal party leaders like Pierre Poilievre, but he's not the only politician doing it, but he's explicitly said that he only recognizes two genders. And this obviously has a negative impact on any of us in the community. So I'm wondering, and it's been something that's been repeatedly talked about in missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit peoples inquiry reports for more than a decade now. So I guess with that context and with how governments have failed truth and reconciliation for more than a decade, what is your plan to support Two-Spirit and trans communities and Indigenous peoples in this country?
And I think we're at Sam. We started time.
Oh, I got 1 minute?
1 minute.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I would say, like, the construction of gender as we understand it comes from a colonial, capitalistic, and white origin. That is where gender oppression all stems from the, interrelation of colonization and the capitalist economy. That's the material conditions under which all of this rhetoric comes into play. So by changing the material conditions, by changing to a socialist economy, of course, I should also acknowledge the socialist economy of the colonizers would be different than the socialist economy of the colonized. That's important to point out. But in trying to change those material conditions and provide actual national sovereignty to Indigenous nations, that is the way to effectively empower those groups of people. When you have an empowered community that has authority over the lands as they have since time immemorial, that is how you can actually be in support. In terms of the rhetoric, this is hate speech, and we need to be having stronger hate speech laws. I guess that's all I'll say on that.
Mary.
I have been an activist, a human rights activist and social justice activist for 43 years of my life. And probably for 66 years of my life, I have believed in equality above everything else. And all my life's work has been dedicated to that. So as an individual, I can promise you that things like equality and gender-affirming healthcare and missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and support for the 2SLGBTQTIA+ community is always top of mind and is a lens we try and put on every single thing we do. Some of that I need help with because of my own privilege and my own position. And so I also believe very solidly that we need to include all the different communities that we represent in those conversations before we go to a place like Ottawa and start to talk about the laws and policies that protect people. We need input from all those communities as well.
Yeah, I would agree on the input, particularly people that are in our community here. LGBTQ2S+ rights and issues are one thing actually the Green Party has discussed quite a bit. I think it's actually the first federal party that the leader of the party was non-binary, and that one of our current co-leaders is also openly gay. So I mean, clearly, we're with that. We know, our leaders know that there are issues, and it's something that we would like to figure. Now, it's not for me as a straight man to sort of come up with those solutions. Again, it's something that I think, as a representative of this riding, I think first and foremost we need to ask people in this riding to have input on it. But I think that there's similar problems that are occurring across the country, and that it would not be that difficult to find other MPs in Ottawa who are facing the same problems and collaborate with them on solutions.
Any other questions?
I'll just say too, if the candidates would like, because we don't have questions online yet, and I'm not 100% sure we're gonna get any, so, and I don't think there are too many in the crowd here, so we can give a little bit longer for the
We have two
question and the
questions.
response if that's, you have two questions?
No, I got one question and we have.
Yeah,
another question.
so, and,
And the
okay,
third
so there will be a few. We have half an hour left, so would the audience like it if the candidates had a little bit more time? Like maybe 2 minutes to each to respond? 2, 4, 6, 12, 24, yeah. We could do a minute and a half, how about that? Okay.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, candidates, for this wonderful conversation. I surely agree with all three of you on a lot of these topics. So in my mind, I wish I could have all of you, and I hope to see all of you at whatever level of leadership that's possible right now. And just being mindful of the fact that this is such a amazing conversation amongst almost friends and comrades. I've noticed oftentimes political, okay, I thought I heard somebody, sorry. I've noticed oftentimes political conversations circle around human rights issues, and oftentimes human rights issues become a political conversation. Whether it's missing and murdered Indigenous women or two-spirited people, whether it's acknowledging Indigenous land or Black labor or disability rights, or even the energy sector. You guys pointed out that facts is not really enough to sway all political parties to do a just transition. So I'm wondering, how are you guys going to balance your own priorities, initiatives, and ideas amidst almost like a very opposing party when you're thinking about the PCs and maybe even liberals if you were to think about some specific topics such as missing and murdered Indigenous women? So just to iterate, how do you plan to prioritize and I guess promote what you're seeing here today in hindsight or in face-off of an opposition party or somebody who might not be in total agreement with you?
Who's, okay, perfect.
I chose to run for the New Democratic Party because I believe in the values and principles of the party, and they align with my own values and principles. The party was born from the labor movement, and that's where I learned all my skills, and that's why I'm here today, quite frankly. I believe that the NDP specifically in Parliament has been very effective ever since its beginning in being able to push for change. Because really, if you listen to the story of Tommy Douglas and Mouseland, we're electing white cats, black cats, white cats, black cats, and we don't ever elect the mice, according to his story. But we can be a voice that, especially if we hold a balance of power in a minority government, but you can still be the voice of working people and of people who have no voice, and still push, and the priorities of the party are many of the priorities that we discussed here this evening. And it is unfortunate that the other two parties aren't represented here, because they may have a different story, or they may say different things, but realistically, when the NDP are in power or in Parliament, whether we're in power or not, things happen like pharmacare, dental care, different types of legislation that benefit people, pensions, unemployment insurance, all that stuff.
Right, Otis?
Well, I think a lot of the issues that we're facing, like there are some issues that get the media attention, but a lot of the key issues are ones that I think if you put all five of us in the same room, we would all agree are the same thing. Like, housing is an issue, cost of living is an issue, the stability of our economy, in relation to our former relations south of the border, are making people nervous. Healthcare. I don't think there's any of the national parties that would disagree on the issues. So, one of the things, Green MPs, although we don't have a lot of them, they have consistently shown that in Ottawa they're very able to collaborate with all parties. I know Mike Morris has done a lot of work. He's worked with the Conservatives, the Liberals, and the NDP. And because they're not a rival, they're not, like, there's no ancient feud going on between them. They can actually work across party lines and say, well, what are the issues? So I don't think it's a big problem to get collaborators in Ottawa, particularly if you're saying, if I ask the people in St. John's East, what are the issues? What are your concerns for the future? I've been asking them at the doors. You hear the same thing. That's what you need to do. Stay in contact and bring that to Ottawa.
And Sam.
Yeah, I'd say, like, to be honest, if I got elected to Parliament, I think all that I could be, unfortunately, is a voice. That is the only thing that I could really provide to you. I think that's really important. I think it's important to talk about very openly the problems that you discussed. That is very important. But the mechanics of how they operate, to be completely honest, the parliamentary system has demonstrated that it is incapable of really effectively dealing with these problems. If we want to have actual things like true racial justice, that comes from outside of the system, as it always has been. It has always been communities outside of those systems, for specifically, I think about the trans community locally, right? It's not been, the official governmental democratic channels of policing that have made trans people safe. That's never been the reality. It has always been trans people and the community standing up for itself. So to actually address those things, I could go to Parliament and I could say all of the right things, but fundamentally to really effectively deal with those problems comes from broad working class movements, right? On understanding class relations and having people power. That's how you actually get places, and then you can sort of bully Parliament into doing what you want. That's how we actually resolve our problems. To be honest, yeah. I guess that's all I'll say, Anna.
And who's next?
Is that on? Yeah, okay, great. I'm Robin Whitaker, and with Elizabeth Yeoman, we co-edit the transportation column in The Independent, so we have a question about transportation. Everyday people have been very concerned about the cost of living, and we've heard a lot about housing and the price of groceries. We know how hard it is on everybody. Something that hasn't got much attention is the cost of transportation, but it's actually the third biggest cost in Canadian households, very close to the cost of groceries, almost identical. So industry sources have put the average price of running a private car at about over $1,300 a month. It's a very significant cost. If you were elected MP for St. John's East, what would you do to try to address transportation costs for ordinary people who are struggling to make ends meet? And what role does the federal government have to play in that?
That's a great question to ask. I'm also very interested in transportation and alternative forms of it. We live in a car-centric society. Canada, United States, if you go to Europe, South America, Asia, you see a totally different type of transportation system. You can get into small towns by train, not even just bus. So one thing I think that we really need to do is to say, what are the transportation needs in any particular part of the country? But I'm thinking particularly here, and say, well, how can they be fixed? What alternatives do we have? Can we make a better, city transportation? Now city transportation, that's municipal government's responsibility. They control that. But you can create plans where you create funds so that municipalities can improve their transportation system, or that provinces can improve their intra-provincial transportation, so that we are less dependent on cars. A city like St. John's in downtown, probably a lot of you are like, where are you going to park? Where do you park when they're plowing the snow? This city is not built for that, but it doesn't need to be. So I think that we need to start investing money into looking at alternative forms of transportation, like the bus, the bike, and smaller vehicles. Like, we really need to look at, yeah, okay, I'll cut off there.
Sam, go ahead.
Yeah, I think some of what Otis said I totally agree with. We need to have public transportation systems, right, that rely on green energy. That would be the optimal situation here, right? Then we are not relying on fossil fuels. We have sustainable transport that is also renewable and affordable. So that's sort of like the immediate answer that I would provide. We can't make that happen tomorrow. What needs to happen, of course, is drastic funding to public infrastructure. So that's sort of a more macro problem. But if we want to zoom out just for a moment, because I think that everybody has been feeling, there's a lot of complexities to what makes the gas prices what they are. And we, of course, want to be moving away from it. But one of the biggest contributors to that gas price inflation that people have been feeling has been the war in Ukraine, right? So that is something that in the macro scale of things, that's why we're seeing these drastic increases in price, right? The real solution, again, it's green energy, public transportation, that public funding. That's how we address it. But in a macro scale, we also need to be, this is part of the Communist Party platform, is having a platform of peace and prosperity, right? When we have warfare and when this increases on the global scale, it impacts everybody else economically, right? And we need to be very careful about that sort of stuff. So when we have a policy also of peace and disarmament, that could probably have prevented a lot of this inflation that we've been feeling. But that's, of course, a more macro solution. That's a very more complicated one. But yeah, definitely, public transportation systems that are accessible, that are green, that is just the most functional, easy way to do this. Well, it's not easy, but that's what we can do.
Yes, absolutely. More investment in public transportation, green public transportation, and that is a federal responsibility, working with the municipalities in that. But also within getting from St. John's, for example, to anywhere else in this province is also very, very difficult. So it's not just public transportation within the city, but public transportation to allow people to travel within the province as well. And we've had conversations about Marine Atlantic more recently. I don't know why the current government thinks it's a new issue that only needs to come up when we talk about interprovincial trade, because really the ferry system to leave this province is prohibitively unable for a lot of people to be able to use to travel on and off this island. So that absolutely should be free for people who live on this island, or for sure something more affordable than it is now, because it's very, very expensive. I think too, in urban planning, we have to make sure that where people can live, where they can walk or use bikes or have some kind of accessible transportation. We need better transportation for people with disabilities as well. But where we plan housing and where we develop housing also does not always pay mind to transportation needs. And I think that's another very important piece of it. Not that the federal government can determine urban sprawl issues, but they can certainly, in developing housing, make sure that that's a consideration.
Go ahead.
Ooh, yeah, quick question. So since the election was called, I've noticed that the big media companies have been giving coverage to just the big parties. So you read an article and it gives you an impression that there are 3 parties as opposed to 5. Like, I've read so many of them, and even if you try to get in touch with them, nothing changes. They just keep doing the same thing. And so what that's doing is giving the potential voters the impression that there are 3 main people. The others are just like joking kind of thing. So, sorry, that's my thought. So my question is, if you get elected, how would you make sure that doesn't happen? How would you make sure that democracy is protected and the big media companies can give fair coverage to everybody, irrespective of if they're big or small? Thank you.
Sorry.
Is it me?
I think it's Sam.
All right, I can go.
Seriously.
Yeah, what comes to mind when you say that is, you're right. There seems to only be we're sliding towards a 2-party system. And if you look at a lot of advanced, I'm sorry, Mary, but your party's like doing really bad in the polls. I hate to see it. We want to see you here, right? We want to see you prevalent. But that is sort of an unfortunate reality. We seem to be sliding, all that's to say is, we seem to be sliding towards a 2-party system. That seems to be the direction that we're going to. And the reason that we're there is because of a first-past-the-post voting system. One way that we can actually ensure a more democratic process is by having electoral reform. There's a lot of different ways to sort of change how we vote so that it is not just two parties in parliament, but then like the rest of us sort of have a chance at actually, you know, authentically representing our constituents, right? I think that there's a lot of different perspectives within this country that are never reflected in parliament because of this two-party system, right? So I would say my answer to that, like, how do we ensure this? Like, first of all, we need to be thanking our like new media sources, The Independent, that are willing to host us, and thank you so much for that, by the way. But you know, it goes deeper than that, where we need to change how our democracy operates so it is more democratic and gives you know, more room for different political parties rather than just two. Yeah, that's all.
I have a couple of answers to that. The first one is definitely proportional representation. That's something the NDP fought long and hard for. Liberals promised, never delivered, surprise, but it's something we need to keep fighting for because every vote should count. If people have the privilege and the right to vote and they're very careful about how they vote, then that vote should be reflected. So I believe in that. The other thing I'll say about the media is that the power of the media rests with people who own it. And that's very clear in the concentration of the corporate media, what that means when people are making comments about who's who and who's winning and who's losing. And that's shameful. And the other thing that I will say is that it is only the Liberals and Conservatives who believe that we have no other option in this system. Those are the only two parties that keep saying it, and that is a strategic strategy on their part, especially when they concentrate more on fear-mongering than actually running on their own records. And that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, I think we probably all agree that proportional representation is the way to go. I think there's only two parties that really benefit from keeping the status quo. So you know how that works. You know there could be different ways that works. Other countries do it. You know it's not a radical new thing. You know I think New Zealand, Australia already have these things in place. The other thing I would say is I think that we do need to strengthen regulations about enforcing CRTC, the Canadian Radio and Television Commission's their regulations. I mean, it is actually, and I do commend you guys for actually, you actually invited me here. Some of these I've had to actually invite myself or, say, hey, I'm going to be there. But we do need to strengthen, like there are regulations that say that you have to give equal voice, on the radio or television, the media. If they represent one, they have to give equal time to all of them. So there has to be some enforcement of that. They have to be called out on having done it. And I like what you said about like fear-mongering. Like every time an election comes up, oh, this is a unique election, like no other election before. We are forced with it. Every election is like that, and don't split the vote. Vote for me because I'm the only one that can keep that guy out, or vote for the leader of the party, Don't vote for me, vote for the leader. It's scaremongering. Anyway.
There is a question over here. I just want to jump in for a moment to say, because I've really been thinking about this a lot the last week, because we hosted a debate in Corner Brook as well. And in the Long Range Mountains riding, the Conservative and Liberal candidates also declined the invitations to participate in that debate. And so my immediate sort of reaction was I was discouraged and I was thinking, should we still go ahead with it? But after doing that debate Monday night and now being here and hearing the quality of the conversation and the respect in the room and the civility of it, I think this is a really important exercise in civic engagement, political engagement, but also like anybody who's watching at home or who sees this, we're going to put highlights from the two debates into our weekly broadcast on the weekend. We're going to send it all out in our newsletter, so it will get out to more people. But I think, and all three candidates in the Monday night's debate, which included the People's Party and an independent candidate and NDP candidate, came up to me after and said, thank you, like this was a really great, opportunity, and it was a really nice discussion. And it was, you never see that. There's a leadership debate tonight, a French one, an English one tomorrow. And I guarantee that the environment and the discourse is going to be very different. There will be attacks, there will be stern voices, anger, and there's a place for anger, but it has to be channeled respectfully. And I think, my big takeaway from all this is that we're recording this. This is going to exist in the virtual world for a long time. And I think that there is something very forward-looking happening here, and people are getting really fed up with the quality of political discourse and the polarization. And I think when you can put candidates together and have journalists and members of the public, voters, ask questions and get thoughtful answers, there's a level of accountability that doesn't exist in other spaces. So for the two main parties to be declining one of very few opportunities to speak and be accountable to the public is concerning. And I think we need to watch it very carefully, and especially what happened here a few weeks ago with the Conservative leader and a journalist getting pushed by a campaign staffer. I mean, it's not as bad as in the States, but it's worse than it's been in a long time, or maybe ever, in this country. So I just wanted to add that because it's something I've been thinking about a lot, and there's a tremendous amount of value in having this event. So I'm very grateful for these three candidates for coming out. And do you have the microphone yet?
No, I do.
Oh,
Sorry.
you do? Okay, sorry. Okay. Thanks,
Yeah,
Cassie.
I had a question about giving a voice, basically. My question was, do you feel that all parties with candidates should be given a voice at the national debate? And what would you do to ensure that this happens now and in future elections? Also, would you prevent, how would you prevent the platform from being misused? Because she said, and the candidates at the front said, they did say that they've not been given a platform to discuss how many political parties are there. There are 5 candidates, and only 3 people that we see currently in front of us, which are supposed to be 5 because they all have different opinions that everybody here should be able to understand and learn from and decide, oh, I'm going to vote for this person, I'm going to vote for the next person. We're only hearing 3 opinions. We're not hearing the opinions of the other 2 people that are supposed to be here, which is not supposed to be so. So my main question is just how should we define the voice to be given to you guys to be able to discuss your platform to us and let us understand what we need to get from this?
And I believe Otis here first.
Again, also a good question for the Green Party, because just today, the leader of our party was uninvited from the national debates. And so there's been a lot of talk among my colleagues throughout most of the day about that, where the criteria for being part of the national debates changed. It's actually become more strict this year than it was last year. I think you had to fulfill 1 out of the 3 criteria for your party leader to be on the national debates last year. This year they bumped it up to 2. 5 parties met the criteria, but then very recently they changed the criteria just slightly, but it was enough to remove the Green Party leader from the debate. So I think in order to deal with this, we do need to have regulations that emphasize that, make it easy for any party that's registered and has candidates out there that they take part in the national debate. We cannot just say, well, these are the only 3 or 4, I guess, if you're in Quebec, that have any kind of chance of making an effect, so let's just listen to them. No, we need to say all of them, because some of them are going to be arguing different points. Some of them are not going to be saying what everyone else is saying. And some people say, well, that's actually a very interesting point. And 4 years later, more people may join that party. So I think, regulation.
Sam, go ahead.
Yeah. Can you repeat I just want to make sure I'm answering you well. Can you repeat the question? Yeah, sorry about that. That makes it weird. I can also just hear it.
Yeah, I said, do you feel that all parties with candidates should be given a voice at the national debate? And what would you do to ensure this happens now and in future elections? And I also said, how would you prevent this from how do you prevent the platform from being misused?
Okay, yeah. So yeah, like, we live in a democratic system, right? That is arguably, the whole concept is that, you can vote for somebody who reflects your values. We are all very diverse people, right? There's a lot of different opinions, and it is so, it's such a shame to the democratic process that, most of the time, your representative is not going to represent your values. That's like true for most people, right? So, that's the thing is when they are placed on an even footing, that is a much more authentic democratic process, right? So that does need to be ensured. We need to be fighting to ensure that that happens. And actually, as it says, like, back in the 90s, under the Mulroney government, the Communist Party actually got into a big legal case with the federal government. What they were trying to do is similar to sort of what Otis was saying. They tried to get rid of any parties that did not have enough seats in parliament. They didn't have enough seats in parliament, you can't even run in elections anymore, right? And so basically, they tried to attack that democratic process, but it was the Communist Party who fought against that in the federal courts and won that case. So, we wouldn't be at this table as a party if it wasn't for communists fighting for that democratic right. So I guess, like, from my perspective, we've always been fighting for that, right? We need to, and we need to continue, because it is always communists typically who are neglected from the democratic process. People don't really want to talk to us. People don't like to publicize us, right? So yeah, that's how I would say is, like, we have been fighting that fight, and we need to keep doing that for a healthy democracy.
Just a couple of different responses to what you said. I was nominated in 2023 as a candidate for my party, and I've been making myself visible, knocking on doors and talking to people ever since. And it is impossible to talk to the tens of thousands of people in a riding. These ridings are huge. So anybody who's a registered party who has candidates should be given opportunity to, because the constituents and the voters and the families deserve to hear who's running and make informed decisions about who they vote for. And I think that's really important. But it's really too bad that when the opportunity is provided, because sometimes there's debates, sometimes they're not mandated or legislated. Some are from businesses, some are from community groups, some are from independent media to want to hear. But when those debates happen, it's shameful when the parties that are invited don't send their candidates to do that, because that's what keeps candidates informed. And that's the work that prepares us as candidates to be able to understand how we need to represent the people that we're going to ask for their trust to get elected. So my position on that is that if you don't show up to an interview, you shouldn't be given the job. So how else are you going to find out what the people that you're supposed to be representing, where their issues are, what keeps them awake at night, what they care about?
Before we head to the last question, did I skip you? Were you supposed to go?
Is there one
Yeah,
more
but that's
question?
okay.
Okay, so
I got it out anyway.
we'll end with you then.
Yeah, it's all good.
Awesome. There was one more question?
No, there's actually two, because the person behind
Okay.
has been waiting for a while. So
Okay.
let's try for this round, because we're at almost 9 o'clock here. So let's try to keep the questions short, and we'll give 1 minute for responses, which is what we were planning in the first place. So go ahead, Jude.
Cutting down on the rights of disabled people before I ask this question. How dare you? Okay.
Sorry.
Sure. So I'm someone with multiple disabilities, and it severely impacts my life. I have been on income support before. Income support, permanent disability whichever way that you want to call it, or however it comes to you. If you're a person with disabilities, it's clearly not enough, and we know this because the MAID program was introduced, and someone like me is actually eligible to die instead of live a quality life because of. And we've talked about pensions, and we've talked about things like that, but I hadn't heard anything around how would you go about supporting people in this district with disabilities? How would you ensure that we have a quality of life? Of course, we talked a lot about jobs and working and economy, but a lot of us can't. Like I can and do work right now, but that could change at any minute. So what about people that can't provide labor, but they still deserve to have a quality of life? Yeah, there was a question in there somewhere, wasn't there? Are we all clear? Okay, thank you.
And Mary, we'll start with you.
Yeah, that's a really important question. And I know when the disability tax credit came out in the last budget, it was appallingly low. Leah Gazan, an NDP MP from Manitoba, has been a great proponent of a guaranteed livable income. And we talk about guaranteed living wages and all that, but hers is a little bit further than that, where she talks about that every single person, whether they're employed or unemployed, whether they're on income support, whatever, deserve a guaranteed livable income. Everybody does, and that would be one way of resolving an issue, especially for people who were unable to work. But that needs to be a livable income, not just to get by, but something that allows you to pay for the basic needs and have that little bit extra because you deserve to live with a good quality of life like every single other worker does in this country. That's one way. There's others too.
And Otis.
Well, I think there's probably a couple of aspects to it. And again, it's one of those things where I don't have any main disabilities, so it's not something I can directly speak to. So it's not something that I should probably be, coming up with a solution for. I think that we do need to set up some sort of system so we find out in any particular community, because it's going to be different in every community, what are the obstacles that stops a person from having, a good life, a productive life, doing the things that, most other people in the community can do. What are the obstacles they're facing? Identify them for different communities, and then have some sort of sort of like an institution nationwide that would then work with regions, areas, communities. Once those areas have identified what are obstacles that their residents face, implicate there. I do think one of the other general things that we do need is better healthcare, which is more comprehensive.
And Sam.
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that you mentioned come back to how our capitalist economy operates. The way that has been, essentially how it works under a capitalist economy is you either work or you starve. Those are your two options. And if you can't work, well, what does that mean, right? So that's unjust. I think everybody can agree on that. But that has become normalized, which is the great tragedy of how this economy operates. So yeah, of course, guaranteed livable income. That is the most immediate answer to this sort of question. But also understanding that, disability is very expansive, and as an identity, it's important, but also understanding that at every point in somebody's life, people become disabled. It should not be thought of as a separate small group of people over there that are affected by this, that are disabled, that we need to be thinking about. Of course we need to be thinking about it in those terms, right? But also that we will all end up disabled at some point in our lives, right? This is we need to be helping our future selves, essentially. But I guess that's how I would answer your question. I wish I had more time.
And go ahead.
Hi, just one more question, I guess, before we leave for the evening. For a debate, there's been a lot of agreement this evening, and fair enough, but I just wanted to ask or give you folks the opportunity to maybe explain how you, as a candidate, as an MP would be different or differentiate yourself from the other folks here tonight?
And we'll start with Sans.
Easy for me. I'd say I am the only candidate advocating for a socialist economy. That is the biggest difference that I have amongst these other two parties. And the other thing, I guess I do want to point out a couple of differences. So recently, the NDP and the Green parties, both within Parliament, have voted to increase military spending. So they both have that part, right? And that is a part where we disagree. And I'm not sure, I know Otis might not vote with this party. I'm not sure where he is on that sort of stuff. But that's a difference, right? Voting against militarization, we want peace and prosperity, not war and austerity. That is our campaign slogan. That is a difference. We want more peace globally. And that is where we vote differently. But also fundamentally changing how our economy operates to accommodate for all of our social spending and dealing with the crises that are upcoming in the future decades. That's how I am different from these folks.
And I think we're not the United States, and we're not voting for a prime minister, even though that's a little bit of the dominant narrative that we're hearing now, that we have to choose between one leader or the other. And for me, I see my role as a candidate is to talk to people about what I offer as an individual, but also an individual who is attached to a party that she believes is a party that represents and puts people first. And I see that as my primary role because we want people to make informed votes. So rather than talk about, and I don't mean this to answer this question, but rather than talk about what the other parties aren't doing, I really like to talk about what I do, where I come from, what my record is, and what the party that I want to represent can do for people. And that's how I define myself. That's how I've always defined myself, and that's what I hope to continue to do.
Well, I think one of the things I can say sets me apart, and I think any of the Green Party, is that the party, we don't have a party whip. Okay, so if there is party policy, I agree with most of the Green Party's policy, but I'm not obligated to. And even Elizabeth May has said numerous times to the public that Green MPs are free to disagree with her, to disagree with the party, if it suits their riding. And I think we're the only of the more or less bigger, we're not a huge party, but of the ones that have sitting members of Parliament that allow us to do that. And that's what you need. You need someone who's going to fight for this community, because you're not voting for Carney, Poilievre, Singh, or even Elizabeth May. You're voting for one of us or the other two who aren't here tonight. So you either need to say, I like that party and I like everything that they're already doing. It already completely aligns with me. Or you have to choose someone who will say, okay, I'll do it for what the community wants, and who will listen to the community.
And before I give it back to Justin, I just want to thank the candidates for coming today and audiences, and I'm going to hand it off to Justin.
Yeah, we're a little bit over time, so I'll keep this short. I just want to thank everybody as well. If you are here or watching online or listening in the broadcast that'll be coming out this weekend and you don't already subscribe to the Independence newsletter, with the billionaire big tech companies taking away our ability to share Canadian news on Facebook and Instagram, our main way of keeping in touch with folks is by email, plain old-fashioned email now. So sign up for a newsletter if you're not already. It's a great way to stay in touch. You can drop me a line, Yumna a line, if you have any questions or feedback or anything, anytime. We're accessible, easy to reach. So yeah, big thanks again to the candidates, and I think that a lot of other folks in other political parties have something to learn, to take away from tonight's debate. So thanks for showing up.